customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. In this week's episode, John brings back Jess Pischel, Customer Experience Consultant for the DiJulius Group and Dean of the Customer Experience Executive Academy. Join them as they talk about the power of establishing consistency throughout every customer touchpoint, creating systems and processes that remove variation and provide a consistent customer experience. In this episode, you'll learn how to transform even your mundane interactions into memorable experiences, to identify the inconsistencies in your business and others, to create your non-negotiable service standards and become the brand your customers can't live without. Now here's your host, John DiJulius.
Welcome to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution. This is podcast number 49. And I am John DiJulius, Chief Revolution Officer. And today I am joined by the DiJulius Group's Customer Experience Consultant and Dean of the Customer Executive Academy, Miss Jess Pischel. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks, John. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Beautiful summer here in Cleveland, Ohio. Hopefully everyone's enjoying it. I'm excited. I probably say this too often, but this is one of my favorite topics that we do, the customer experience cycle workshop. That is an absolute must that every single company in the world should do for themselves or have done. I believe this is really where the rubber meets the road. It addresses so many issues. Tell us about what the customer experience cycle is, Jess.
I agree, John. This is one of my favorites too. And this is probably one of the workshops that I do most often. And like you said, it's something every company can use, should have. So it's one of the ones that we do most often for that reason. And it's one of my favorites for sure because of that. I'm really comfortable with this one and I like to see the results that it brings. So the customer experience cycle is something that we will refer to as the CEC. So we'll refer to it as that throughout this episode, but the CEC, the customer experience cycle or the client experience cycle, it's also could be known as journey mapping. Sometimes when I work with my clients, they'll say, oh, we already have a journey map. I'm like, well, do you do these things? Does it accomplish these things? And if the answer is no, we still will do some version of this. But the customer experience cycle really looks at every stage and touch point in that entire customer journey from start to finish and every touch point in between. So like you said before, it's something every company can use. And that's why I really like this one.
Yeah, and to go with the CEC, customer experience cycle, which I'm glad you brought up. Many people know it as the journey mapping. And it's the same thing. I think the way we do it and the way we recommend it done is just phenomenal. We'll certainly get into it. But you might call it the patient experience cycle. You might call it the employee experience cycle. You might call it, whatever you call your customer, you could just substitute it. But for commonality today, we're going to call it the customer experience cycle or the CEC. And it's funny, like it solves so many things, almost anything that could be going wrong in your company where you're dropping the ball too much, where you have inconsistencies from one employee to the other, from one department to the other, one location to the other, can be traced back to improving. If your customer experience is bland and it's not, that much better or honestly any different than your competitors or most companies that your customers can experience, this addresses that. If you are frustrated because very few employees go above and beyond, and you got, a few that seem to do it all the time. And then you got a majority that rarely, if ever. This addresses that. I mean, it addresses so many things, and the way we do it and the way we tell you to do it. You get company-wide buy-in, interdependent cohesion, again, awareness of service defects. You create non-negotiable standards that reduce the inconsistencies, the emphasis on experiential opportunities, which is one of the real keys here, understanding the difference between operational, experiential. That is kind of the secret sauce there that traditional journey mapping doesn't address. But then you have your training manuals and standards, and then your customer experience metric improvements.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there, if I were to Google your business and use that phone number that Google has as your business, and I called that number, would you be confident that I would receive world-class customer service right now if I were to do that? Or would you be a little nervous? Would you start sweating that perhaps I wouldn't maybe get one of our A players on, having a good day? Or would you be nervous that I would maybe get like your B or C team players that, I hope they're not having a bad day today? Or how would they react?
I think a good way to put that, Jess, is not just you calling, but let's say we're going to record that call and let everyone listen to it, right? That changes it. Like, whoa, right? How's that going to go over, and are you holding your breath that I hope Martha answers and maybe not Sam or, whatever. You're like, it depends on the day. We don't want that, right? We don't want to be dependent on who or if their boss is working or if they, and it's not fair to the employee, but if they're new, right? We don't, and we're putting employees in high risk positions by throwing them out there, not being trained, and they could only disappoint.
Yeah, exactly. The best world-class customer service companies or companies, I should say, make sure that they're consistent. So regardless of who you get on the other end of the phone call that day or on the line, regardless of what time of day it is it 9 a.m. on Monday morning or is it 4:59 p.m. on Friday afternoon? So it will not surprise you that the most successful companies provide that consistent service in every interaction, at every location, no matter what time of day, which manager's on duty, like you said, what type of day they're having. So I always ask my audience who has the most complex Starbucks order. And there'll always be that one Starbucks diva in the room who wants that super complicated order that, the list goes on and on that ticket that's right. Stuck to the side of the cup.
They have to text to you because there's no way you'd ever remember it.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you order that extremely complex drink, venti soy latte and a extra hot, no whip, blah, blah, blah. If you order that drink in Cleveland and you order that exact same drink in California, it's going to taste the same. It's going to be delivered with a smile, personalized with your name on it. It's going to taste the exact same. Now, if you're not a Starbucks drinker, what is the equivalent of that? Where you have the same consistent order. There's others that deliver that consistent service too. And how do they get that way? So the CEC, the customer experience cycle, really helps identify these areas and these touch points so that our team members are trained to make sure that they're doing the same thing consistently every single time. And that when there's above and beyond opportunity, that they're aware and they're able to act on it. So there's a lot of pieces of the customer experience cycle that I'll talk about in our session together today. But the awareness is probably one of the biggest pieces and biggest takeaways that my clients get from working through this content.
Yeah, when you're creating it, as we'll get into, there's 4 components of every stage. And more importantly, or as important, is the awareness of this is what most people do wrong in our industry, or that we could even be guilty of, that we're going to make sure we don't do. And then understanding what is kind of, the operational versus experiential, and then increasing everyone's awareness to all the low hanging fruit that we can go above and beyond. So give us all an example. You gave us one, Starbucks, but give us another example of a typical experience and one that with little work can have a significant difference in the experience.
So if you think of a hotel check-in, something you've all done before, may have been a while, right, with the current state of everything, but I think it's something we're all looking forward to getting back into is travel. So if you look at a hotel check-in, this is something that you've all experienced, whether it be at a Holiday Inn, a Marriott, a Ritz-Carlton, or a Motel 6. So what typically occurs when you arrive at that hotel to check in? The receptionist will greet you. They'll ask for your name on the reservation. They'll ask for your driver's license or your credit card. They'll confirm that room rate and date of departure, and then they'll hand you your room key and send you on your way. So this is a simple, mundane transaction. This is what they all do, right? That happens at the Ritz-Carlton, that happens at Motel 6. That we consider to be operational. It's what you have to do, right? It happens everywhere. It happens at your competition down the street. It's something that we have to do to complete that transaction. But in this workshop, what we do with our clients is we take it to the next level. So most companies just stop at the operational, right? They have their SOPs, their standard operating procedures, and they have a manual that's pretty boring and long, and that's usually where they stop. So this is a really big opportunity to differentiate yourself from the competition by just spending some time focusing on, well, how do we provide an experience in that moment? It doesn't have to be a boring, simple, mundane transaction. There's a way we can elevate that. And so we focus on the experiential standards. Well, what could we have done in that simple hotel check-in to make it an experience? Well, we could have our receptionist greet you, but we have them greet you using the 5 E's, which we say are eye contact, enthusiastic greeting, ear-to-ear smile. Those can all be done in 1 second. And then you have to engage and educate. So, yeah, do you have any dinner plans tonight? Oh, do you like Italian food? There's a local restaurant that I highly recommend, right? You're engaging them and educating them. You don't have to do that. It's likely not happening at the Motel 6, but it's definitely happening at places like Marriott and Ritz-Carlton. And then they can ask you, how was your trip in from Seattle? And how do they know that? Well, they ask for your driver's license to check in. So that information is right there in fair game. And then finally closing out that conversation, instead of just handing the room key and sending you on your way, they can ask, is there anything else we can do for you today? So these are experiential moments that receptionist doesn't necessarily have to do. But when we do these things consistently, it's a nice touch for the customer to experience.
Something I want to suggest, I love this, Jess, is that because when people start listening to this, they're like, oh my God, you're adding so much work to our employees that'll slow them down, or I need more staff. No, we have 4 rules, if you will, criteria when we look at if we can add it to the non-negotiable list. Because the last thing that anyone wants to do is take their non-negotiable list from 4 to 12 or 16 that they'll never be done consistently. And thus it doesn't make it a non-negotiable. And the second thing is this shouldn't add 10 seconds to an interaction, so to speak. So the 4 rules is it should add no or very little cost. And sometimes the cost is just on the initial setup maybe, but typically these ideas don't add any cost. They got to be so easy to do because listen, all our employees, especially our customer facing employees, jobs are complex. A lot of times they're understaffed and we don't want to burden them with a lot more. Number 3 is no impact on productivity, meaning it doesn't add 10 seconds. So when you gave the example of how was your trip in from Seattle, well, we're not asking them to Google them before they get here and so I'm handing you my credit card and my driver's license and it says my hometown. And then the 4th is it's a wow to the customer, right? And that's the coolest because they knew I've been here before. They knew I came in from Seattle, or they engaged me, or, those things, which makes it a really cool experience.
Definitely. And the main point is to get to those experiential standards. There's 4 categories, which you referenced a few minutes ago. But for that simple hotel check-in, for example, what we would do is look at the service defects, right? Where do we drop the ball? What goes wrong in this interaction? What could go wrong? Maybe it's out of our control. Maybe it's something that we do to drop the ball, but we look at those service defects. Then we take a look at those operational standards. What do we have to do in that moment? Maybe those are your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, and maybe you already have that. If you do, great. Let's throw them in there. We can save some time in the workshop not having to write all of those down. And then we look at experiential, which is how do you provide an experience in that moment? And I'm going to provide a few other examples of what that could look like in this episode. And then finally, going above and beyond. How do you go above and beyond in this moment? And it's spending the time with your team to intentionally focus on that, because that's something that we don't necessarily have the time to do. There's not a meeting every Friday that says, how do we go above and beyond? And everyone is at it to collaborate and establish those, usually in most companies. So this is an opportunity for your team members to bring these ideas to the table and to really be creative here. It doesn't necessarily, every above and beyond doesn't necessarily have to be throwing free stuff at them or adding or giving discounts or anything like that. It could essentially just be another opportunity to engage and to offer something based on the information that we're hearing, just to make sure we're going above and beyond. And it's that awareness to go above and beyond. So really, we're looking at service being what you do. And then we're taking it a step further, which is really going to help you differentiate yourself from the competition, because most companies aren't doing this. But how do we provide an experience? How? The experience is how we do it. So service is what you do, and then the experience is how you do it.
So let me just jump in with, I could say this about each one of those 4 parts. If this is all you get from doing the customer experience cycle workshop, it's a huge win, and you should get hopefully all 4. But like just the awareness of service defects. Most employees, especially most new employees, aren't aware of their industry, that business, what upset, we've stated this several times. Most customer-facing employees have never been a customer to that type of business. They've never stayed at a 5-star resort. They've never flown first class, whatever the type of business is. And so now you're teaching them that this really annoys. They're calling to make a reservation at a spa and they feel like they're getting rushed. They aren't asked questions that make sure that there's clarity and certainty. There's so many service defects that can happen when you walk in. You're not greeted right away. You're not told what is going to happen. She will be right up. She'll actually be up in 15 minutes. Whatever those things, no one's at the front desk. All these things, it's like, all right, so if you're training your new employee, we will not be guilty of this. Like, and obviously, like all these, you can think of 50 service defects, but you just want to come up with 4 or 5 because it's anything is 80% of the time when you make a mistake, it's in less than 10% of the area. So if I can get all my employees that we will never be guilty of this, and this, we will be so much better than anyone else in our industry or anyone else they come in contact with. And you can really look at that from each lens, and the education, even after you roll this out, you can then focus, 1 month on those service defects. The next month you can just focus on experiential standards. So there's so many pieces to this. That's why it's phenomenal. It just addresses so much.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's such a great point, because one of the best benefits of these workshops is the intentional time set aside for interdepartmental collaboration, where people can work with each other and they don't usually get to, right? You may be meeting someone from manufacturing and you're in customer service and you always call that number and ask them for help, but you've never actually met Joe, right? So it's an opportunity for team members to have awareness internally as well. And that's a lot of things come up in these workshops that wouldn't have come up had we not had this intentional time to do so. And I'll give you an example. So I'm working with Charter Farm and Ranch Equipment, and their products are sold nationwide in Lowe's and Home Depot. And now that I mentioned them, you'll see their logo probably everywhere. But we had a workshop just a few weeks ago. And when we get these team members in the same room talking about some of these service defects, it's almost like we have to parking lot some of those, because we can't solve all of these defects in one day. But like you said, John, it's the awareness. And your defect, this is a living, breathing document. So your defects that are defects right now may not have been defects, let's say, a year ago, but now they are. So you have to constantly keep looking at this document and have a pulse on it and make sure, hey, what are our service defects now? So for instance, a lot of companies, and Tartar being one of them, is experiencing the dreaded shipping delays. We live in the Amazon world of instant gratification, right? But they're selling larger products, for tractors and farming and ranching equipment. So that Amazon 2-day Prime isn't necessarily something they can always do because the equipment weighs, 5 tons or whatever. It's hard to ship right away. So shipping delays, that's a big one. Now, was that a problem, as big as a problem, a year or two ago? No, it wasn't. But now it's a service defect, and their team members have to make sure that they're still providing an experience in that moment, even when they're delivering bad news, which is zero risk in a way, right? Zero risk is one of our commandments in the trademark DiJulius Group methodology, but it comes up as a service defect as well because it's something that the team members are experiencing. So there'll be things that come up in this workshop that bring awareness to other team members that when we address these as a group, it's an aha for everyone in the room. And it's so cool to see. It's awesome when teams collaborate like this and are able to really take a look at some of the service defects and then work on a solution together, be part of the solution.
Right. And then, I might not be in your department, but dependent on your department, vice versa. And I realized, wow, your job's a lot harder than I realized.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So that's why we often recommend that when you do some of these workshops, you have representation from multiple departments in your organization so that you can get those aha moments from your team members just on awareness of knowing and learning from each other to create this document. It's fun for the team members to be a part of. It's an honor for team members to be a part of. And people really enjoy these workshops and getting to know their team members better too. And I get to be just basically a witness. I'm a facilitator, of course, but I love being a witness to these aha moments because you can just see their light bulbs go off when they're doing their group work. But what we do is create those operational, if you don't already have it, right? Some companies already have their SOPs, and we don't have to start from scratch if you have that available. And most companies do, but some newer startups that we work with don't necessarily have SOPs for that specific department or for that specific interaction. Maybe it's a new interaction that they recently added to the experience. So sometimes we do have to start from scratch, but most often we don't. But we look at the operational standards. So that's the service portion of that customer touch point. These are things that employees have to execute in order to complete that transaction. And these are things your competitors do. So think back to that hotel example. Marriott has to do it, Motel 6, and everywhere in between. So your competitors do these things, and it's unnoticeable by the customer unless it's not done. So thinking back to that hotel transaction, when the hotel's front desk asks you for your credit card, it's unnoticeable to you unless it's not done. Although it would be nice, if they forget to ask you for that, but they won't, right? It's unnoticeable by the customer unless it's not done. So that's the way we attack the operational portion. These are tasks or things that we have to do to complete that particular stage. And then we take it a step further and focus on the experiential piece. And this is the best part. It's things that our team members don't necessarily have to execute, but now that we're creating these, we want them to commit to them, so they will.
When you say have, explain that, because that could be misleading. You have to because it's part of our brand promise, but you don't have to because you could actually achieve the outcome, not the outcome we want, but the outcome that without doing it. But that's what makes it so important.
Yeah. So that's, I don't have to smile when I'm talking to you, right? I can still complete your task, monotone, boring, without smiling, get it done. But you can hear voice inflection and when people are smiling and engaged. So those are experiential pieces that we want our team members not only to come up with, but commit to. If it's just me coming in and saying, you have to smile, it may last a week, it may last a month, but after that, it's going to fizzle out. We want your team to come up with those. And I'm there to provide the best practices and to guide them and to help them navigate what should be included. But it's best and it sticks when it comes from them. So they commit to it, right? They're bought in because they committed to the fact that we have to smile, we have to engage, we have to use the 5 E's. So this is a reason why our customers return, right? Refer others and become brand evangelists. So you, all the listeners on the line right now, probably you have a brand that you can think of that really creates an experience for you, whether that be Peloton or even I have a few that I love, Amazon.
What are yours?
Probably the ones that a lot of people have, and that's why the brands are so successful. But I'd say Amazon. I have this one place where I go shopping all the time, and they know me by name. And right when I walk in, they already have a dressing room started for me. And the store is called Ever Eve. But I swear every time I walk out of there, $100, $200, which I wouldn't have normally spent, but they make it so easy, right? They know me by name. They know my daughter. They hold her while I'm trying on clothes. Like, they make it just so easy and fun. It's an experience. Whereas, you'll walk into a department store in the same complex and no one will even look your direction, right? So it's just a brand I really love. But John, I'm sure we share a lot of the same as far as like Amazon, Apple. You're a Peloton user as well, but what are some of yours?
Yeah, I think you just said them. I mean, it's like Amex, Amazon, Apple. Those are mine. I've always been a Starbucks fan. And, at the end of the day, the product, the service are really a high level, but I can get that elsewhere. It's the experience. And most of all, it's the consistency. It's just peace of mind that very rarely will I have an inconsistent experience. And if they do, they fall over themselves to make it right. And that's just what people want today, is someone being brilliant at the basics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, so experiential, like you said before, it doesn't have to be, you're not adding more work to everyone's already busy plate by creating these new standards. Some of these things we're doing already, just not consistently, like you just said. So now that your team creates them, put it in writing, it's in black and white, it's going to print, right? They're committed to it. So things that are simple, not adding, an hour plus of extra work to everyone's plate, but just simple things you can do, like smiling, using their name 2 to 3 times in conversation, having that energetic, friendly tone, a simple warm transfer. This one is such an aha moment that my clients, they realize when they're not doing it, and they realize how frustrating it is. And then it's almost like a light bulb, like, oh, why are we doing that? It's frustrating when I'm the customer and I get transferred 5, 6 times and have to explain my annoying situation that happened. Let's take that off of our customer's plate. Let's not have them re-explain an issue over and over again as we're transferring them. Let's just take care of it. Let's warm transfer them to the next department. And then it's also making sure that you're warm transferring internally, so you're not pissing off your other department by just hitting, star transfer and sending the customer on their way, and then they're blindsided. Like, wait, who is this? Wait, who am I talking to? And it's like, oh, it's on both ends. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to be a customer in that situation, and it's frustrating to be an employee in that situation. So that one's a huge aha.
Just like, even I think low-hanging fruit is the proper thank you. Like, just saying something as little as, is there anything else I can do for you today, Jess or Miss Pischel, or however you wrap that up. Like, that's just low-hanging fruit, but it makes the person you're dealing with feel like they're the only one. It takes no longer to say, even though you might have 3 blinking lights or 2 people behind them or whatever that engagement is. So just by wrapping it up, that's experiential that they don't hear, and they're appreciative that you care enough to see if there's anything else you need, instead of getting the feeling that, you got to get to the next person.
Yeah, exactly. And as my clients are working through this, I think they do struggle a little bit on the difference between operational and experiential. But what I tell them is, relax, don't be too hard on yourself as like, which column does it belong in? Is it operational or is it experiential? Don't fight over that, because when we go to finalize this, you combine the two and they just become your new set of standards.
So that's confusing to a lot of people, Jess. So I want to ask you, why, if you're going to combine them, why do you separate them now? So visually, if you're looking, if you could, see this, is you got service defects. That's what not to do. And then if you go the farthest to the right, is above and beyond. That's what you capitalize on when resources allow. And resources is typically not time. It's typically not money. It's time and awareness. But the middle part is operational standards and experiential standards that when you're baking it, you split it up. But when you train your employees on it, you merge them as non-negotiables. So my question to you that we get is, why do you have to overcomplicate it? And why can't you just make it non-negotiable standards from the start?
Good question. Yeah. So sometimes companies don't have a list at all. Like I said, they don't have their operational standards. So we have to separate them from the beginning to really understand, all right, what do we have to do? And then what should we be doing? So separating them, and that allows people to see the difference of, all right, here's what other companies do. Here's how we differentiate ourselves. So that's the best part about it, I think, is making sure that there's a clear, when you have to write them separately, it forces you to create an experience if one doesn't exist at that point.
Because when we do it with clients and we pre-populate this from their operating SOP, is it SOP? God, I'm forgetting what standard operating procedures. Yeah, that's all of a sudden you write down and all you have is operational standards, and you have very few, if any, experiential standards, that means that's your competitors do too. So you have no different experience than anyone else. And so it's really important to see that we got to add a little sugar to our black cup of coffee, or we're not differentiating. And then, as you were saying, when it gets rolled out, it doesn't have to be that granular for the employees. They just need to know these are the non-negotiable lists. They really don't have to understand if it's operational or experiential. That's only when you're baking it.
Right. And when you do roll it out, sometimes people think, oh, we're already doing this, but are we already doing all of them? Probably not. And maybe we are sometimes, but not all the time. And so the true outcome of this document is a commitment from everyone that we're going to do these things every single time. So likely in most cases, there's not too many new things here, but that's a good thing, because then it doesn't take us as long to train all of these things. Now, if you didn't have a process before, yeah, there's a little bit more work on the training end of it to make sure everyone understands it. But I find that when I roll out a lot of these things, a lot of times people already, for the most part, understand the operational standards. And when we weave in those new experiential pieces, those are some more aha moments, like, oh yeah, I do that sometimes, but not all the time. Okay, now there are non-negotiable standards. I have to commit to them. And we do some role play, and we could talk about implementation. I'll share a few examples of what that would look like. But when we create those non-negotiable experiential standards, I always find that my clients struggle with experiential column and then also the above and beyond. Like they just, when they get to that whiteboard and they're about to write down what should be experiential and how do we go above and beyond, it's a lot of the first times they've ever done an exercise like this.
Right.
So
listen, it's easy to think about what goes wrong because we live it.
Yeah.
And it's easy to think about, dotting the I's and slashing the T's, right? You got to get their credit card. You got to make sure they sign here, and they got to make sure. That's all easy, but this is where the work comes in. And that's why, as you know, we always start off with doing a higher level keynote that kind of gets their mind and imagination and innovation. So whether you're doing this on your own, have people read different chapters of the book, The Customer Service Revolution or The Relationship Economy, so they start to see experiential standards and above and beyonds. And for clarity, above and beyond opportunities are experiential. Okay. Now the difference, and you might have already said this, Jess, the difference of why you put them above and beyond and experiential with under experiential standards or above and beyond is if you can't do it every single time, it's an above and beyond. So, Jess checks in and I ask her how her vacation was last week. Well, that's an above and beyond. We wouldn't put that under experiential standards because probably 9 times out of 10, we don't know when our clients, customers went on vacation. We just might have stumbled on, she might have told us before she left or saw an Instagram post or whatever that is. And we remembered when she walked in. So when resources allow, time and awareness, but we can't be asking everyone that walks in our building or everyone we talk to how their 3 boys are or how their vacation was, or, that's not something that we can do. So that's where it goes under above and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think to that hotel reservation or check-in, and you ask them, you're engaging and you're educating because that's part of our standards now, and you find out that they're celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. Well, above and beyond. Okay, how do we go above and beyond? Well, I can upgrade the room. I have it available. Now, I'm not going to upgrade every single person's room. That'd be not what we would want to do, right? But when the opportunity presents itself, when available, when resources allow, it is an above and beyond. Like you said, we can't do it every time, but now that we're engaging and educating, we know that information. Okay, we can do a room upgrade, right? That's a surprise and delight. That's an above and beyond. But it could be, maybe what if we don't have the room available? Okay, a simple handwritten card, happy 50th anniversary. I mean, it's the little things that really mean a lot to customers, especially now because the bar is set so low with travel and with COVID and with all of that. I even hate bringing it up, but it's so true that customer service, I feel, is just become, worse than it ever has been.
It just came out, Jess. It's at the Customer Satisfaction Index. American Customer Satisfaction Index reported it's at its lowest point since 2005.
Oh, I believe it, 100%.
Looking for more innovative customer experience ideas? Join us October 5th and 6th for the Customer Service Revolution Conference. In-person and virtual tickets on sale now. Visit customerservicerevolution.com for more information.
But one of my favorite above and beyonds is back to our hair salon business that we started. Yeah, you might be checking out one day and you got your hair put at an updo and you got your makeup done and you're going somewhere really fancy tonight, out to dinner, to a wedding, whatever it may be, and it's pouring rain out. So, we hope that our receptionist will, walk you outside with an umbrella, go get your car, pull it around so you don't battle that storm. Now, we can't do that with all 300 guests checking out today. We just don't have the bodies or the resources, and it would screw up operations. But 298 guests don't need us to. It'd be a nice to have, but 298 guests aren't going to, they might have a baseball cap on and they just came in for a pedicure. So it's not the end of the world that they, get a little rain on them. So that's the above and beyond component.
Yeah. And that doesn't really cost you anything extra, but it's biggest thing is the awareness. Do you have an employee or a team member that's going to think ahead and think, oh, let me grab an umbrella for this person? Or do you have an employee or team member that is just looking at their to-do list or looking at the next person here to check in and trying to check the next person out because they're waiting? So it may seem like common sense as you're hearing us talk about it, but realize that it's not so common unless we train our people, and that's part of our culture, that they're empowered to do it in the moment. And that's the awareness that the above and beyond brings, is the awareness in that moment. Are they trained? Have they experienced this before, that they're willing to do it and they don't have to ask a manager, hey, can I run this person outside? But it's just assumed, and it's part of the culture that you're not going to get in trouble for doing that, right? You should be doing that. You're going to get in trouble if you don't, right? So it's creating the awareness for those above and beyonds. And I think that's why a lot of my clients struggle with that category when we get there, because they're maybe just not used to doing it. And that's why they hired us, because they want to make sure that those things are happening.
Well, this can't, as you know better than anyone, this can't be a workshop done in an hour.
No.
You have to do it in small pieces, because there's a certain point where you get to the, diminishing returns. And that's why you want to pre-populate maybe the service defects and the operational standards, because that's the easiest. And you don't want to use all your brain energy on those. You clean those up, tweak them. You look at your service defects and say, what can we add that will, operational standards or experiential standards that will reduce. So an example is our salons, back to the salons. people can feel like we're rushing them, whether it's in the salon or on the phones. So that's why we built into the experiential list, username 2 or more times, saying, is there anything else I can do for you today, Miss Smith? Just a couple of those things help reduce the appearance that we're just trying to, book them and get them off the phone. But it's definitely a slow process. It can't be rushed. And the goal of a great customer service, customer experience organization is deliver outstanding results with average employees. And that's not an insult to anyone. What it means is you don't want to create such a sophisticated customer experience cycle where you now have to go out and hire superhumans and pay them double than you normally were. No, you create really simple yet consistent thing that everyone gets trained on. If you go to a Chick-fil-A, they're 19 to 21-year-old kids. They're not getting paid much different than any other fast food restaurant, but the results are what they're delivering. And that's what we're talking about is we also don't want you to go out there and over create the experience where average employees can't achieve this.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes people are, like I said before, just nervous about putting something up there like, that's too far-fetched. That's silly. We would never be able to do this. So it's my job as the facilitator and as the consultant to lean into that and say, put it up there. This is a workshop. Let's get all of our ideas on the board right now.
No idea is a bad idea.
Exactly. And also when you're inviting people to this workshop, you want to make sure that you're inviting those people who already are going above and beyond, because they can share their examples of what that looks like or how they thought to do it. And then other people start realizing, oh, okay, I had a chance to do that last week and I didn't think of it that way. So it's an opportunity for, again, we talked about awareness on the service defects, but it's an opportunity for awareness on those above and beyonds too. So that's the most fun part of the workshop for me is looking and seeing what those above and beyonds they come up with. Because although some of them may seem totally far-fetched, when we go to finalize it, maybe not so much. That's why they're in that above and beyond column. And what we recommend is that this is a living, breathing document. There should be someone that is solely responsible for making sure that everyone knows and understands these concepts, that's applying these concepts, and that is in charge of editing the document should things change. So when you think of editing this document, it's like, it feels like such hard work, but it's a great thing because some of those things that are maybe on that above and beyond list right now, when we look at it next year, we may say, okay, a few of these can move over into that non-negotiable category.
Right. And then, you're right. Some things were like, shame on us that this can't be a standard, but you might not have the system, CRM system, whatever it might be. So start off with it being an above and beyond, but within a year, 2 years, it better be something that is delivered every time.
Right. And then revisiting it and setting the bar even higher for yourself and making new above and beyonds. And then you have the opportunity to invite new people into the workshop to give them a crack at it. So it's really fun to see how the document evolves over time too, and how the company just continues to grow with it. And then that's how you get it to be a part of your culture. We have so many clients that are like, how do I get this to be a part of my culture? And how do we have a culture shift and a mindset shift? And I can't promise that if you just create this document and let it sit on the shelf and collect dust, it's going to do anything for you. I wish I could wave the magic wand and make it happen, but that's just not the case. You have to.
I can promise it won't. Just creating it and printing it is the easy part. Even creating the answers is the easy part. And we might have put the cart before the horse because, we got to start with the first part before we dissect each stage in the service defects, non-negotiable standards and above and beyonds, is how do we figure out what stages are? Because that, as you know, there's three things. There's cycles, there is stages, and then there's, actions within stages. So let's start with defining and explaining clearly what's a cycle, what's a stage, and what's an action.
Great. Yeah. So cycles are the entire customer journey, right? from, if you think of the most simple model, think of Chick-fil-A or a drive-through service, a McDonald's, something like that. A cycle would be the entire, customer cycle experience from start to finish, all of those stages / touch points. So we use those words interchangeably too, stages and touch points. But a cycle is, think of it as when you smile and greet a customer, next thing you have to do is take their order. After that, you process the payment, then you present the order, and then maybe it's the thank you and the customer's departure. So that would be an entire...
Even in the simplest model, let's say a fast food restaurant, okay? Yeah. They have they have 3 different cycles, which is not stages. So they have a drive-through cycle of its own 3 or 4 stages, right? You pull up, you may place the order in the, communication box, and then you come around and you pay and you receive the order. And that might be a simple, but that's the drive-through experience. And that might only have 2 stages. They have the dine-in experience where you walk in, you place your order, and you go sit down, and then you might have the carry out or the delivery, all depending on the type of business. So each of those are independent cycles with their own set of stages. And then the more complex you get, B2B, business to business, will have numerous cycles that have their own stages. Yeah. An easier one to understand is a hotel or resort. They have, they could have up more than a half a dozen different cycles. Another word is an experience for a cycle. So you have the room reservation, right? And that's where you call up, make your room reservation. That's stage 1. Then you go up and you might be dealing with valet and the bellman and the check-in and the checkout and housekeeping and that all the room stay. That's one cycle. But then you jump to, you could have activities or dining at the resort. That dining is its own cycle with its own set of stages. The spa at the resort has its own cycle with its own set of stages. Golfing at the resort or pool, they have their own stages with their own, that's its own cycle with its own stages. So not to confuse the heck out of people, you got cycles, which is basically a niche of an experience that your business offers, and then the touch points in there. And another really key thing is when you create your stages in the cycle, it's what the customer experiences, not as much behind the scenes what we're doing, but it's the customer experience cycle. And that word is really important in meaning it's not the company's experience cycle, it's the customers. So if Jess is my customer, what Jess is seeing, what she's feeling, what she's experienced when she calls up, when she walks in, when she receives her delivery, whatever that is, we are looking at from her or the customer's vantage point, not the company's.
Yeah. And then if you think of what would be a task, those tasks happen in that stage. So those action items would be what happens in the stage. And then all of the stages together are the cycle. So if you think of an automotive plaza or dealership, you maybe have the sales cycle, and then you have the service cycle, right? When your car has to get fixed or whatnot. So
completely different, right? Completely different. You're not using the service the same time you buy the car. That's in 6 months when you need an oil change or something is not working. It's completely, typically different people, right? A different set of experience, different set of touch points. So as you just pointed out, there's a sales experience and then there's a service experience.
Right. And then this isn't just for retail, right? You mentioned B2B, business to business, which the DiJulius Group is a business to business. So we actually have several different cycles, and it pretty much averages out to be, we have a cycle for each revenue stream we offer, because there's different things that we need to do. There's different touch points that our customers and clients have in those different cycles. So we have the customer service Revolution, which is our big conference, our Super Bowl. That has its own cycle. We have a consulting business, which is what I do with my clients. That has its own cycle.
All right. So Jess, for clarity, let's look at your the consulting experience, which is its own cycle. Give me some touch points that you and the DiJulius Group have to manage, because I know, and you know, it's very similar to even like, any professional service, a law firm, an accounting firm, any type of consulting firm. We probably have the very similar touch points. So what would be the stages in like our consulting practice that we have to manage?
Yeah, so this is everything that happens after our business development person hands the client to me. So at first I have to onboard them. I have to make sure that I have warm transfer from my business development person, Claudia. I have to make sure she gives me all the information. So that would be an action item in my first stage, which is onboarding. So first stage would be onboarding, right? I have to make sure I know the client, they know me, we know the project, everything that goes into that one. And then in onboarding, we'll have our service defects, our operational standards, our experiential, and our above and beyond. So after I onboard them, then I have my first day on site with them. And so I'm either doing a discovery type process where I'm sitting down and interviewing team members and really determining the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities that I see exist, or I'm having a workshop. I jump right into having that workshop, which would be a customer experience cycle or a CEC or a service vision or a internal culture workshop. So another touch point would be my day on site with my client. And then after my day on site, I would have a follow-up call with my client and make sure that we finalized our content. And so that would be an action item within that stage. So it's every touch point that I have with the client, from when Claudia hands them over and I get them onboarded to me finishing all of my things I need to finish with them before we have our last phone call and we talk about next steps.
Renewal or yeah. And something that's really important there that almost every company will have is the sales side. That's its own cycle experience. And a lot of times, someone might not, in our world, it's not the same person. The consultant is not the one that's working the pipeline and closing them. And so the sales cycle, depending on how long, how short, that could have, several stages. And that could be, depending on the business model, 3 months to, 12 months. Everyone's different, every business model, but that's its own cycle with, lead gen, the, first, discovery on, and all the sales until they sign an agreement. And I don't care what business it is, with the cracks always happen. The most important stages are the transitional ones. So you said it, they sign the agreement with the salesperson. And now they're being handed off to the consultant, you, and the onboarding. That's in every business. In employees gets recruited by one person, a potential employee. They get hired, and now they're hired, and their onboarding is always, can fall through the cracks because, the employee, the potential client, they built a relationship with one person that's why they want to work or come to work for the company or hire the company. But now all of a sudden they land in someone else's lap. If that isn't strong and there isn't good handoff, they get really upset and panic saying this was nothing like it was explained. And the person, that was promising me the world has disappeared. And now I'm trying to get someone else to return my calls or, take care of me. And the transitions, onboarding are always the critical part.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I worked with an automotive dealership, Alcera Auto Plaza, one of my favorite clients. They just did such a nice job in finalizing their content and making sure it was really part of their culture. And that starts with leadership. Matt, Sarah, and his team are just incredible. So they have two primary cycles. They have their sales cycle, and then they have their service cycle. Now, in both cycles, the first stage is a greeting. Right? We have to greet the customer that is either coming in to get their car serviced or coming in to potentially purchase a car. So yes, both their first touch points are very similar, but different in a way, right? If they're coming in to the sales team, it's maybe our first interaction with them. So we're going to greet them, not better or worse, just a little bit differently. Whereas if they're coming in for service, we should already know when we're about to greet them if they have an appointment, if they bought their car with us, how many cars they've bought with us. Like, we have a little bit more information on that customer when they get to the service side of things than perhaps we do in a brand new greeting for a new customer in the sales side of things. So although both of their first touch points are titled the same thing, the action items underneath the operational standards, the non-negotiable standards are a little bit different. So when we workshopped this, we had both sales and service in the same room, helping collaborate on these. All right, well, what do you do in the greeting? All right, well, what should we be doing? Oh, we do that. Oh, we don't do that. Okay, let's add that to ours. So we had sales and service who maybe don't necessarily always get time to work with each other, collaborating and sharing these ideas. So all in favor of a better customer experience. And so they have their sales cycle, they have their service cycle, and then they realize, we need to add a guest service cycle. So they have their own team of individuals that answer phone calls and schedule appointments and follow up with clients and customers. And we realized that those team members needed their own cycle too. So that was an aha that came up as a result of doing these first two workshops. And that's actually pretty common. There's some things that come up in these workshops that you realize, oh, we should be doing this. Let's add it. And then it almost becomes a new cycle. I have another client that did that as well. Camargo, they're a pharmaceutical consulting company. So they work with the FDA and their clients to make sure that their drugs that they're creating are being approved by the government. So they are a consulting firm, not obviously in the same line of business as the DiJulius Group, but a lot of similarities as far as how they consult their clients and the communication patterns and whatnot. So their cycle, they also realized, like, originally they were having these client closeout meetings, which was an opportunity for team members to collaborate. And somewhere along the lines, they got away from those. So they added it back to their cycle. In the client experience cycle, it's an opportunity for their team to have a project closeout meeting to discuss lessons learned, best practices. Here's what happened. It's a learning opportunity. And it's also an opportunity to celebrate some of the successes that came out of that client engagement. And the reason why I share that is because it's something that the DiJulius Group is also now implementing, is a project closeout or an annual strategy meeting, we're calling it, so that we can have the opportunity to share our client success and say, look what you've accomplished. Look what you've done. Here's our recommendations on next steps. Here's how we think you can continue to move forward. Here's how you can apply your above and beyonds. Here's what your KPIs, your key performance indicators and measurements were. So it's an opportunity for some celebration and also to look at lessons learned. You know, maybe we rolled this part out a little too quickly, or maybe we could have emphasized this key point a little bit more, or we know this department's doing really well, but this one can use a little bit of work. Why? So it's an opportunity to have those types of discussions. And I share that because there's a lot of things that come up in the workshop that aren't necessarily going to be able to get answered in that workshop, but they need to be, right? We're going to be a better organization as a result of the awareness to these specific things and acting upon them to put things and finalize things and make sure they're in place. So those are just two really good ahas that came from clients of mine that I love to share because it's just a great success story for what this workshop can do.
I love that. That is great. And there's so many, like, no customer experience cycle workshop is the same. And there's just so many ahas that come out of it. The only thing, there's a lot of things that you could do wrong. It's rushing it. It's not being inclusive enough people in it. It's hard work, but it would be the biggest return on investment if you do it right and you manage it afterwards. So let's just recap. How do you choose your stages? How do you choose your cycles? What mistakes should people avoid? Can you give us an example of what an action is that sometimes people mistake as a stage?
So a stage would be that initial phone call. And then sometimes people add information to system. That's the second thing we do. Okay, that may be the next thing you do, but that's an action item of the phone call, right? The phone call is the stage. The action item is what you need to do as a result of that phone call. So sometimes I have to ask my client, is that a stage? Is that a customer touch point? Or is it something that you have to do? Is it an action item? And that's how I guide them into figuring out what stages. Now, usually this workshop is a 2-day workshop. We can do it in one day, depending on how many stages they have or want to accomplish. But one of my first questions is, where do you feel we would make the biggest return on your investment with our time, energy, and resources? What stage, what department, what can we have the biggest area of opportunity here? And if I have a discovery day, I'll find that information out by meeting with team members. But sometimes the clients know what theirs is. Maybe a department's bleeding, or there's a heightened awareness for a new department developing or something like that, where we know what the stages are or should be. But I usually recommend doing it by department, like your stage. So sales versus service, right? Those are cycles within those. But sometimes my clients have stages within several different cycles that, hey, we need these areas addressed. And so if that's the case, I'll say let's pick your top 5 stages and focus on those. So it's really an initial conversation to help guide them and establish where the biggest areas of opportunity for improvement will be. And then we focus there. So if we have a 1-day workshop, we'll do about 5 stages. If we have 2 days to do it, we'll get to the finalization of about 5 to 8 stages. So it really just depends. Every client is a little bit different. We've worked with many industries, so we usually have an example of what to share and we know how to guide them. But sometimes they have, like I said, an area that's really bleeding or needs improvement or has a lot of turnover or something like that, where we know that that's where we should focus our time and energy on those specific stages. And then, like you said, not inviting the right people to the workshop. First, we really like to determine the stages, and then from there, we determine who should really be involved in that workshop, because you don't want to have too many people talking over others. So, our clients know their personalities better than we do. So you want to have a few new people, a few veterans, and then a few in between, of course. So diversity in this workshop is really important for that awareness and also collaboration. So,
and you want to make representation of not just management. We got to have people there doing it.
Yep.
Right. And it'll have no buy-in if people who are viewed sitting in a white ivory tower, they haven't ever done this job or haven't done it in a decade, are telling us how to do our job. We want it, it done, helped created by the employees for their coworkers, and it has a lot more credibility. And they're going to tell us, and they're going to be honest, saying that's not realistic.
Right. And then I think 1 or 2 emerging leaders is a good thing too, because you want people in this workshop that are going to be invested in it for a while and that you see growing with the organization. I always think it's great to include some of those because they can be helpful in the finalization process as well. Because you're going to walk away from this workshop with a ton of big life-size Post-it notes of a lot of information if you're not doing this virtually, if you're doing it in person. And you're going to need someone to make sure that that's an electronic document and scribe it all. And then we have to finalize it. So there's a little bit of work that comes in afterwards. But as far as mistakes people make or mistakes I've seen, I think making sure you have the right people attending, making sure you choose the right stages, those are huge. And just making sure that you spend a lot of your time, almost too much time, talking about the experience and how to go above and beyond, because those are going to be the game changers in your business that will allow you to differentiate yourself from the competition. And that's what the workshop's all about. So also, biggest mistake with anything, with any one of our pieces of methodology, is lack of implementation. Letting it sit on the shelf and collect dust, or not touching it again for the next couple months because you have other things going on and you're making excuses for why you haven't touched it. I mean, like you said before, John, we can almost guarantee that it's not going to be successful if you don't have someone driving it and really in charge of the implementation portion.
So what do you do with this? After you have the workshop, you finalize the answers, you have a recommendation, what you've seen just the best to launch it and get it, and hold people accountable to it.
Yeah. So the best thing to do here is to make sure that everyone in your workshop is becomes a brand ambassador for the project now, almost like those people were part of the creation process. So keep them involved as best you can. They're going to be the ambassadors kind of on the floor in those departments, really owning it. Or when a team member has a question, like, why are we doing it this way? Or I just don't understand it. those people are going to be the ones that can help make sure that it spreads and permeates throughout the brand. But you really have to implement some version of training or huddles. Some clients that we work with already have an LMS, a learning management system, that this can just be infused into that. And okay, this is how we train our people on concepts, and this is how we are successful. Some of my clients don't have that. So it's kind of, we look at it a little bit differently, make sure that it's simple, not much more work on the managers initially. But again, we are trying to create behavioral changes and cultural shifts. So it is a little bit more work initially, just to get everyone on the same page and understanding the concepts. But to do that, we recommend either hijacking a portion of a weekly meeting for the next couple months and making sure it gets the attention it needs, or implementing a totally new meeting. I know everyone cringes when I say adding more meetings to the calendar, but you have to make sure that it's well received. You have to make sure it's getting the attention it deserves. And you have to make sure people are constantly talking about it, reinforcing the concepts, making sure that people are able to ask questions when they don't understand things. You have to have a platform for it. And whether that be an LMS or whether that be you have the person platform where you have to roll it out and almost train the leader with those brand ambassadors and make sure everyone understands it. So whether you implement weekly or daily huddles, department specific, or you hijack a meeting that already exists for the next couple months to get that awareness around it.
And, we could talk about this for hours, and you're such a wealth of knowledge on this. The one other thing, and what we have other podcasts coming up where we'll tie back to this, especially the return on experience dashboard, the KPI, key performance indicator metrics that would drive this and let us know that, in fact, who is doing it and who isn't, and the impact it's having. Jess, this has been awesome. Closing wrap-up points for getting our revolutionaries to invest or reinvest in their customer experience cycle. Even if they haven't, if they've done it in the past, I mean, you can literally revisit this, and you need to annually at the very least.
Yeah, that's one of the brilliant pieces of John's methodology that you've created, is that it's applicable to any company, whether or not your team members serve the end user, the customer, or they're serving a department that serves the end user or the customer. And this is one of the pieces of our methodology that can absolutely be used with any company in any industry. It can and should be used, and it's a great tool that all companies should implement. And it allows everyone to be a part of the SOPs, to be a part of the creation process, to really make sure that your team members are providing an experience, going above and beyond, and it'll allow you to differentiate yourself from the competition.
Well, Jess, this was awesome. You definitely know your stuff, and you can shine. You can just feel your enthusiasm and energy when you talk about the customer experience cycle. And it's one of the best workshops that we do, that you do, that have just had such a significant impact on the results our clients are having. So thank you so much for your time today and your brilliance and your experience sharing. And I want to thank all our revolutionaries for tuning in to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to and being part of the Customer Service Revolution. To hear more episodes, subscribe now on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We love feedback and look forward to your reviews, likes, and emails. Join John live at this year's Customer Service Revolution. Tickets available at customerservicerevolution.com.